How would you like a 15% discount to my daily email, the stack of stuff, the show notes, discounts to the conference, all of that? All you need to do is text the word show to 33777. You'll get the annual subscription with a 15% discount to my daily email. You'll get the stack of stuff, the links to the show notes, discounts to the conference, and so much more. All you have to do is text the word show, SHOW, to 33777. Text show to 33777.
Welcome to the Eric Erickson Show podcast, Hour 2.
My fellow Americans, how are you? It's Eric Erickson here across the nation. The phone number is 877-973-7425 if you want to be on the program. Now, listen, those of you on hold from around the nation, it's kind of cool to get calls from all over the nation today. Be with me, be patient, stick with me. I'll get to your phone calls towards the end of this segment, but I really want to bring people up to speed on what's happening right now. This is really, really important what's going on here, and it's not getting the attention, I think, frankly, that it deserves. The American media today is paying attention to portions of it, but it really is kind of wild, actually, to see some of the stuff that's happening around the country with these protests. So to begin with, you need to know, Joe Biden has just released a statement. This is assigned to Andrew Bates, Deputy Press Secretary for the President of the United States. Quote, President Biden has stood against repugnant anti-Semitic smears and violent rhetoric his entire life. He condemns the use of the term intifada, as he has the other tragic and dangerous hate speech displayed in recent days. President Biden respects the right to free expression, but protests must be peaceful and lawful. Forcibly taking over buildings is not peaceful, it is wrong, and hate speech and hate symbols have no place in America. I want you to notice something, however. Joe Biden hasn't said anything. Joe Biden has not said a word. The press secretaries have issued written statements, but Joe Biden has not stood up and forcibly denounced any of this stuff. If Republicans were involved and it was Christian nationalists or white supremacists, Joe Biden would be calling out the National Guard. You know it, and I know it. Every single last one of you knows it. It would be called another insurrection. The terrorists are smashing windows at Columbia University. They've taken over a building. They even took janitors hostage inside the building. I don't recall anyone taking hostages on January 6th, but these students have managed to do it. At the University of California in Los Angeles, UCLA, students dressed in the keffiyehs blocked Jewish students from entering the library, told the Jewish students they were not allowed to go in the library, blocked their path. When the Jewish students refused to leave, the Palestinian sympathizers approached them and in some cases assaulted them. Yesterday, I played you the audio of the Columbia University professor on Fareed Zakaria's show on CNN, who said that the media was misrepresenting the Columbia University protest because none of the anti-Semitism was coming from the kids on campus, despite the fact that a lot of it was. CNN, a network that claims it cares about misreporting and disinformation and misinformation, allowed this guy to come on and say that when it simply wasn't true, and they didn't challenge him. Fareed Zakaria did not challenge him, and in fact, yesterday, after the guy had been on TV, they started chanting again, Palestine from river to sea, which is a call for genocide against the Jews. It's massive violence. Larry Summers used to be the president of Harvard. He makes a great point with Anderson Cooper.
Campus, when they get funding from the outside for their activities, is expected to be accountable. I think there need to be close investigations of how these protest efforts are being funded. So this is not about which side you are or how you think about anti-Zionism versus anti-Semitism. This is about a basic concept of academic freedom, which involves respect for order. And on too many campuses, those values were not upheld with sufficient vigor over the last 6 months. And
Let me ask
rather
you.
predictably, you're seeing consequences now.
Now, he says that, but Anderson Cooper raises a good point. Remember the kid who did the like on video, I played the video of him. He went on this anti-Semitic tirade that Zionists are Nazis and they all need to die. And they left him on, they didn't suspend him, they didn't expel him until it became public knowledge. Now that it's public knowledge, they banned him from campus. That guy was back on campus last night, leading the violent insurrection, throwing the rocks, storming the buildings, taking the janitors hostage, that whole thing. That happened. He was out there. They said they banned him from campus. Here's Anderson Cooper raising a good question.
Zionists should be killed and didn't deserve to live. And that wasn't grounds for expulsion. It's only now that that person has been expelled from the school, months after that was already out there.
I'm not going to comment on the facts of that situation because I don't precisely know it. But yes, something I saw at Harvard was a dean, someone who had the title dean, was busy passing food, burritos, into protesters who'd occupied one of our university buildings. And our administration did nothing about that. And now they're surprised that protests have grown and mushroomed.
Yeah, you think Jonathan Greenblatt, it was on MSNBC. He's the Anti-Defamation League's president.
Building at Columbia last night. You had someone with a sword at UCLA on Sunday. This isn't normal. People showing up fully concealing their faces like they're ISIS fighters, that isn't normal. And I heard from kids again and again and again. They are leaving campus. They are moving out of their dorms because they are worried. At Columbia, of course, President Shafiq, she had to close classes. I don't know if people realize this. Classes are over at Columbia. They all went remote because the administration was so afraid of these people. I see these videos. I see these images of mass protesters breaking into buildings, barricading with furniture. And look, I'm reminded of January the 6th. That's what this looks like to me. I mean, we talk at ADL about right-wing extremists, about masked Proud Boys showing up at school board meetings, about Oath Keepers wearing masks. I look at this, and this is what I see. And let's be clear about one thing. The students who are doing this, the groups behind it, SJP, Palestinian Youth Movement, their response to President Shafiq's offer last night was, Columbia will burn. I mean, these students, we shouldn't treat them like children when they're hardened activists.
He's right. I love that he, the president of the Anti-Defamation League, made the January 6th comparison as well. He's right. He's a progressive, and he has made the connection. These are terrorist sympathizers. They're American young kids covering their faces. Isn't it interesting as well how the mask has become part of identity politics? You wear the COVID mask, and it identifies you as a righteous progressive. It's all religious symbolism. Reminds me of my book coming out, You Shall Be as Gods, on how the secularists have become their own religion these days. It really is remarkable to watch this and to watch so many universities allowing it to happen until it turns violent. And they're like, oh my gosh, what have we done? Well, you should have stamped it out a long time ago. It's continued to get worse. And, you know, we're not even at the summer riot season yet. These kids, they're headed towards Purge 2024, which is the new name of the Democratic National Convention in Chicago. You are going to see violence. I mean, think about this. You've got a communist mayor of Chicago who hates the police and the Jews. He's on the side of these protesters. The Democratic National Convention that believes they need these kids' votes, they're not going to crack down on them. And these kids have no restraint. It's going to be the purge in Chicago. It's going to be remarkable to watch. Y'all, I'm going to pop popcorn. You know, you made the flames of Chicago may be so hot, no, regardless of where you stand, you might be able to just pop popcorn standing outside. Chicago is going to burn in August when the Democrats show up. These kids are, it's going to be violence unless the Democrats crack down with a serious police force, at which point they're going to alienate these kids from the Democratic Party, and Joe Biden needs them. Again, here's your key takeaway point. The protests on these college campuses have turned violent. They are beginning to beat up Jewish students. They're blocking Jewish students from campus. They're blocking Jewish students from libraries. They've taken hostages in one building at Columbia. They've smashed windows and doors. They've done more violence than what the January 6th insurrectionists did. The Democrats were all upset about that. And the president of the United States has not yet come out and spoken publicly. He's only released statements this entire time. He's released printed statements. He has not once come out himself, looked at the camera, and told these kids to stop because he needs their votes. As promised now, we're going to go to the phone calls because Caroline and Dwayne, they've waited patiently. Caroline in Dayton, Ohio, WHIO. Welcome to the show. How are you?
Hello.
Caroline.
Sorry.
That's all right. Welcome. Surprise, surprise.
It figures. I think the issue with the Ukraine and the funding would be a lot reduced. People wouldn't be as upset about it if our southern border was secured. Every time I hear somebody comment about it, it's like, well, we're sending stuff to Ukraine to help their border, but our border is wide open. I think if we closed our border, I think you'd have a lot less resistance to help.
I think you're absolutely right. And I think the GOP should have fought harder on that issue. Now, there are a lot of people, and I want to explain this one to you and to everybody listening. There are a lot of people mad at the Speaker of the House saying, well, I mean, he's given the Democrats what they wanted on Ukraine. He's just a Democrat now. Actually, there's something in the House of Representatives called a discharge petition. And there were enough signatures on the discharge petition of the Senate funding package that the Speaker of the House couldn't stop it. So what Mike Johnson did that was smart tactically was he authored a Republican piece of legislation that didn't spend as much and also cut off TikTok funding or support for TikTok. And that's what the House passed. He couldn't stop the Senate legislation from getting a vote, and it would have passed unless he authored a countermeasure. So for all the people saying he gave the Democrats what they wanted, actually they wanted the broader Senate package, and they got a more restrained package out of Mike Johnson. So the Democrats didn't get what they wanted. But you're right, Caroline, had we funded the border, had we secured the border, there'd still be some, like I think James who called, and James, I don't mean to pick on you, really don't. I hope you're still listening. But James would have still not wanted the funding of Ukraine, but I think there would have been more people willing to give it to him. Dwayne, you're going to be up next. Welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks, Eric, for taking my call.
Sure.
You were talking about Kristi Noem yesterday, and, of course, obviously, no way she's going to be vice president, okay? But what about Secretary of Defense? She can still serve, because if you think about it, last time his Secretary of Defense was Mad Dog, right? Well, she'd take Mad Dog out and shoot him.
Yeah,
I think it's a good deal.
The problem is she used a shotgun and couldn't kill a goat. The goat was able to get outside the blast radius.
Man, the goat wasn't going to stand there.
Yeah, I mean, think about it, though. She tried to take out Osama bin Laden's girlfriend, and the goat jumped out of the way. It just... Yeah, but,
Thanks
yes.
for taking my call, man.
Absolutely, yes. She's qualified to be Secretary of Defense, except when it comes to taking out goats. Yes. They had this conversation. We'll play it when we come back. The incredulousness on Fox. And I got to tell you, I knew what was going to happen with the Kristi Noem stuff yesterday. Mr. Erickson, I just hung up. I couldn't listen to you. I can't believe your disrespect of farm culture. You city slicker. No one's interested in this story. No one's interested in this story because I'm not interested. No one's interested in you, city slicker. Y'all need to Google Jackson, Louisiana. I did not grow up in. I grew up in Dubai, but I spent a lot of time. My grandparents were in Jackson. It's where I was born, where I moved back to. Population 1,000 if you count the mental patients at the local state hospital. My grandfather was a farmer. To say I'm a city slicker, y'all don't know who you're talking about. What you don't know is that I know that even 20 years ago, it was possible, instead of gunning the dog down, to find a trainer if you couldn't do it. But regardless of whether you want to defend your culture, this gets back to postmodernism, and everybody wants to be emotional. And I got to defend my culture, and I'm not from the city, I'm from the country. We kill dogs. It's not about killing the dog. It's that she thought it was a good story to put in a biographical book to show she could do tough work. and she decided she needed to write a book and tell people how she killed a dog, and then decided she might as well go grab that goat off the farm and bring it to the pit and shoot it as well. And she missed the goat. She thought this was worth putting in a book. That's the story. I don't care about your country culture killing dogs, which, by the way, everybody's over-exaggerating. I care that this woman, psychopath, really believed that it was a great story to tell in a national publication about how she killed a dog and a goat. She is nuts. Okay, I finally have found a use for AI. It's all the buzz these days. I just texted this to my buddy Justin Owen at Owen Security. So this isn't an ad for him, I promise it. But I got a security system from Owen Security in Atlanta. They have cameras around our house, and they can detect people or animals. They can send me alerts, and they've got bullhorns around the house. And so if they see somebody come into the yard at random hours, they can yell at them. And it works, because I was in my hot tub after the system triggered several weeks ago, and I got yelled at by the security people, and I had to call them and say, no, it's really me in the hot tub. In any event, so someone has invented, they call it Paint Cam. It uses AI, and it fires either tear gas or paintballs at intruders. So it uses facial recognition and an AI system to determine who's there, whether it's friend or foe, and should they be fired. I would use the sucker on my kids in the middle of the night. They're coming in late. I would fire paintballs at them just for the heck of it. But finally, useful AI. It determines how far away they are, whether or not they're in range, what's loaded with it, whether it's tear gas or a paintball, what sort of paintball, how far it can fly, and whether or not they're an intruder or not. And then it fires at them. That's pretty clever. Now let's do bullets. When the bad guys come, we'll show them who's boss. But paintballs fired at the intruders. We actually, I mentioned this thing, the Owen security system that we've got. We had people come into our yard. People were doing car break-ins in the neighborhood, and somebody set foot in my yard and got the bejesus scared out of them when Owen security started yelling at them. I've been recommending them to the neighborhood. It works very well. They found for some cameras, they found a way to walk behind a sheet or something, and the sensor doesn't get triggered, but not with my system, thank goodness. It's weird they're finding ways to get around the Ring systems. Anyway, I got to move on. Americans for Prosperity, they're doing a bus tour around the country. A lot of people forget, and I've done a whole monologue on this. We know what works. We know what works to revitalize America. We know what works economically. We know the policies that work to reduce inflation. We know the policies that work to recover the country. We know. People just forget. So Americans for Prosperity, they're doing a bus tour around the country. You can find out where they are, prosperityispossible.com. The whole idea is to remind Americans we know the path to prosperity. We know it's possible. We know the economic ideas that work to revitalize the economy. We know the economic ideas that work to reduce inflation. We know. And so come hear about them. Come remind yourself of the tried and the true. Prosperityispossible.com. Go check it out. Prosperityispossible.com from Americans for Prosperity. Find out where they'll be in your area. Hello there. Welcome. It is Eric Erickson here across the nation. The phone number is 877-973-7425. I knew this would happen, and it doesn't surprise me at this point that people get so defensive. The Kristi Noem stuff, the people who told me, you know what, I turned off the radio. I can't believe anybody listened to you because it's such a nonsense story. It's not the big story. Everybody wanted to miss the point. It wasn't that they missed the point. It's that they wanted to miss the point, and that is that Kristi Noem decided to put this story in a book. She didn't just kill the dog. You can justify killing the dog if you want to justify killing the dog. Then she went and got a goat. She killed the goat. Justify the goat as well, I guess. But it's that she put it in a book and thought it would go over well with people, and she's very defensive about it now. It's not just me. Listen to this. This is a conversation from Fox News last night.
Quickly, a lot of dust up over this book by South Dakota Governor Kristi Noem, in which she says that she shot her family's puppy, shooting dog, Cricket, shot and killed it because it was going after livestock. It was, she writes it in the book, then she defends it in this post saying South Dakota law states the dogs who attack and kill livestock can be put down. Basically, she's walking back this part of her book where she seemed to be touting the tough decision that she made to shoot this dog.
Well, when you think about people having a dog put down, and now I've had the experience with the dog we had in our family once had to be put down. You go to the vet, and the vet does it with a shot, and the dog goes unconscious, doesn't feel anything. Not a lot of people I know of have gone out and executed their own dog, and I think a great many people in America look at that and think it's telling. I think it's damaging, Brett. I really do. Cruelty to animals or shooting your dog strikes people as not normal behavior by, they will probably imagine, a not normal person.
But the fact that she wanted to say that is also telling.
Peculiar. I mean, if I were a political advisor to her, and that's not my department, but had I been asked for an opinion about it, I'd say, don't put that in your book. Whatever you do,
all right,
shot
Britt.
your dog.
As always,
thanks, Brett.
I just that's the point, y'all. Forget people's defensiveness about country life and farm life and all that. She decided to put it in a book that somehow she thought, this is going to make me look tough, and I need to put this in my book. Because, as I think Casey Hunt on CNN speculated, Donald Trump hates dogs. This makes her look tough to Donald Trump. No, I think she wanted to use it as an example of looking tough and making tough decisions. And, it's my dog that my children loved, but we live on a farm and life is hard and we had to kill it. And then I had to go get a goat and bring it to the gravel pit. And I shot it with a shotgun and missed. The whole thing, regardless of your defenses of farm, like, why put that in a book? Why put it in a book? I mentioned the mockingbird. My wife, outside our bedroom window, has been plagued by this stupid mockingbird that started chirping not during the day, but from sunset to sunrise. And it was right outside our window. It was keeping my wife awake. And my son and I, we went out there. We tried to throw tennis balls. I thought maybe we shoot fireworks. Maybe I should shoot a shotgun. Go find Kristi Noem. No one told me until after I mentioned this on air. It's actually against the law to kill a mockingbird. It's not just a thing you don't do because of Atticus Finch. It's actually against the law. It's considered a migratory bird. You're not allowed to kill a mockingbird. They just fly into your windows when they see themselves and they kill themselves. This bird finally stopped. I think it must have just decided that the cicadas during the daytime were delicious and has been getting its fill. Y'all, we have so many cicadas. And it must have just gotten itself full up and is sleeping through the night now because it has stopped, thank God. But I didn't. And if I had killed the mockingbird, I wouldn't talk about it on the radio. Kristi Noem decided to write a book and as an example of doing hard things, she killed the family dog and one of the family's goats that her family decided not to castrate. So, of course, it was stinky and aggressive. And because the family didn't do what it needed to do for the goat, she decided, well, I've killed the dog. I might as well go get the goat and write about it 20 years later to show that she was tough and could make tough decisions. That is a psychopath. Now, there are some people in the audience, because I know my audience, there are some saying, I can't believe that you would call her a psychopath. You're such a misogynist. You wouldn't say she's a psychopath if she was a man. Yes, I would. Yes, I've called plenty of men psychopaths, and she's just in the long line. A friend of mine yesterday says I missed an entire lecture on the crazy hot scale. But yes, there is also, side note, if you look up the crazy hot scale, it explains everything. There you go. We'll leave Kristi Noem alone. Because, I do love the one person says, no one cares about this story. I turned off my radio and you started talking about it because nobody cares about it. Really? They cared enough for Brett Baer and Fox News to talk about it too. My goodness gracious. All right. I do, however, have other stuff that I would like to talk about, including, here's the problem for Joe Biden and the Democrats. 4 out of 5 Americans support Israel. Let me explain to you what's going on here. There's a tie-in story. Those of you who are concerned about funding Ukraine, listen to this. This is going to blow your mind. Including the Biden administration's new student debt cancellation plan, it's from the Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget. We estimate all recent student debt cancellation policies will cost a combined $870 billion to $1.4 trillion. That's more than all federal spending on higher education over the nation's entire history. The vast majority of this debt cancellation was put in place through executive actions under President Biden. Y'all, Ukraine funding is chump change compared to this. The debt cancellation for student loan debt is more than all federal spending on higher education in the nation's history. Now, combine that with this story. 4 out of 5 Americans support Israel. 80% back the Jewish state. Meanwhile, 72% of voters say they back the IDF, the Israel Defense Force, military operation in Rafah to finish the war, while only 28% say Israel should back off. Now, what's so notable is the Harvard-Harris poll asked Americans, do you favor a permanent ceasefire? And it was like 70% said they favored a permanent ceasefire. But then they asked a second question. Do you favor a permanent ceasefire if Hamas does not return the hostages? And only about 20% of Americans said yes. It was a great way to show this talking point about the people want a permanent ceasefire, contemplates, well, you got to give the hostages back or else no. All of this is to say what Joe Biden is trying to do is cobble together a coalition of small groups because he knows that the election, he's going to have a base of Democratic support, and he's got to cobble together a small group to offset the 50,000 voters who might go for Donald Trump. The problem with Joe Biden doing this, the bad politics of it, is that he risks alienating himself with larger pockets of voters because of these policies. It's really bad politics. So let me drive this point home for you with the malpractice I think the Biden campaign is doing. And here, I got to be honest with you. Biden can win in November, and he can win by Trump losing, and his campaign will still have committed gross malpractice along the way. They're just not going to be held accountable for it if Trump flubs and loses. But let me just make this point to you. Bidenomics. Joe Biden embraced the term. Joe Biden campaigned on the term. Joe Biden's campaign embraced the term. Joe Biden's administration embraced the term. Democrats embraced the term. And they didn't go bother buy the website. Americans for Prosperity did. This isn't me doing an ad for Americans for Prosperity. This is campaign malpractice 101. You embrace terminology that it's a unique term tied to your name, and you don't go by the website so your political opponents do. That was a piece of political malpractice. Joe Biden refusing to come out and forcefully denounce to the cameras the student protests around the country and the rise of anti-Semitism, relying instead on statements. That is him trying to play to this base of people. But it's also campaign malpractice because all the data shows there are way more people concerned about the student protests than support the student protests. His campaign has continued to engage in a series of political malpractice acts that Democrats, including Barack Obama, have warned him to stop. But the Biden campaign is so arrogant, they have convinced themselves that not only are they in the right, but if Barack Obama gives them advice, he's automatically wrong, even though Barack Obama has done something Joe Biden has never done in the presidency, which is win re-election as president. But these people, they're arrogant, they're nasty, they lack all sorts of humility, they think they know everything. And they've decided to cobble together incremental pieces of coalitions in order to win. And in the process, they don't even realize they're losing larger pools of people because they're so convinced. They've convinced themselves they hate Trump so much everybody else does, so Trump can't win. And that's exactly how Trump's going to win because they think he can't. Now, let me squeeze in a phone call here. I want to go to Michael. Michael, welcome to the show. How are you?
Well, a little scared about my country, but other than that, I'm doing fine.
Good.
I was asking the call screener, Where's the Republican National Committee and the people that need to be talking about all this stuff? Because early voting is supposed to be happening soon. We have an election soon.
Yes.
But we, the Republicans, seem to be handed this election on a silver platter with the protests that started. Law and order, an issue, national security, an issue, water, an issue. I like the stock market, which I wish I hadn't done this morning. It's down like 300-something points. The economy is an issue. And yet there's nobody out there seemingly speaking voices about this, especially someone that's even possibly looking towards next election, like DeSantis or Haley or whoever.
This is something. Listen, and I can only do so much, and you can only do so much telling Republicans you've got to vote early. Early voting is happening. Like here in Georgia, the Georgia primaries outside of the presidential race, the congressional races, local races, state legislative races, they're happening right now. And Republicans, I saw Josh McCoon here in Georgia. He's the chairman of the Republican Party in Georgia, doing a video pushing people to early vote. But so many Republicans stigmatized early voting in 2020, claiming that, well, the Democrats were going to steal it if we early voted. They're going to cancel our ballots. They walked themselves into defeat, and I'm afraid it's going to happen again. We should win this election, except we talk our side out of voting. And how do we talk our side out of voting? Well, we, and not me and not you, but collectively Republicans say, well, don't go early vote. We all got to show up on Election Day. We got to have a show of force on Election Day. Except when it rains, nobody wants to go do it. When it rains or snows, nobody actually wants to go vote. And that has become the problem here because people say they're going to go vote. It's going to be bold, blah, 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 blah. And then it rains or it snows or they're hungry or the line is long and they don't show up. And, well, they lose. That's not good. We got to change that. Y'all, I've mentioned to you Old Glory Bank, and it is my bank. I actually decided I'd go through the whole stock purchase thing with it, which I thought was pretty innovative. Time is running out on that. If you're interested in doing that, I decided I would do it as well. So what is this? What am I talking about here? Well, they've pioneered a way to add so many customers, and they're allowing people to take an ownership interest in the bank without going through the stock market, which I think is pretty innovative. So they've added tens of thousands of accounts in all 50 states. They've grown deposits by over $115 million. They've got customer accounts, business accounts, home loans, their own payment app called Old Glory Pay. They've even got Old Glory Cash In, which gives more than 88,000 retail locations where you can deposit your cash into the Old Glory bank account. I've done that, by the way, several times. It works. You get a QR code. You take it to, like, the local CVS by me is one of the places. They scan it. They take your cash. It goes into your bank. All these innovations, and now you've got a chance to buy into Old Glory Bank. But this round ends May 10th. For complete details on Old Glory Bank's unique public-private placement opportunity, go to own.oldglorybank.com. That's own.oldglorybank.com. Owners must be accredited investors. Ownership interest is not a deposit at Old Glory Bank. It is not FDIC insured. It is not guaranteed. It may lose value. Own, O-W-N, own.oldglorybank.com. Welcome back. It is Eric Erickson here. The phone number is 877-973-7425. If you want to be on the program, if you text Eric, E-R-I-C-K, to 33777, you, my friends, can get the podcast, the live stream, the show notes. You should click on the show notes. You should subscribe to the show notes. It's rather important, I personally think. Governor Ron DeSantis, this is happening right now, has announced Freedom Month. It's going to be summer tax relief for Floridians looking to enjoy the outdoors. He says starting July 1st, there's going to be a Freedom Sales Tax Holiday Initiative. Tax-free fishing supplies, camping supplies, boating and water activities, pool supplies, sunscreen, bug spray, general outdoor supplies, gas and charcoal grills, bicycles. A Freedom Sales Tax Holiday. So if you're a campus protester and you go to Florida, you'll be able to buy your tents without having to pay sales tax to fund the man. You're all going to have to go down to Florida, though, to buy it. If you don't, I want to go back to that Larry Summers clip. I played it earlier, that we do need to look at the funding. Where is the funding coming for all this stuff? This is Summers on Anderson Cooper's show.
I think just as anybody on a university campus, when they get funding from the outside for their activities, is expected to be accountable. I think there need to be close investigations of how these protest efforts are being funded. So this is not about which side you are or how you think about anti-Zionism versus anti-Semitism. This is about a basic concept of academic freedom, which involves respect for order. And on too many campuses, those values were not upheld with sufficient vigor over the last 6 months. And
Let me ask
rather
you.
predictably, you're seeing consequences now.
Yep, he's right. Where is the money coming from? They didn't all go out and buy these tents. The tents came from somewhere. They didn't all go out and buy the ground tarps. They came from somewhere, sometimes with the tents, sometimes not. They didn't go out and just spontaneously all do this. There has been a level of organization. Where did the money come from? My guess, a lot of it came from Qatar, which is continuing to subsidize the terrorists and these students for justice for Palestine or whatever they're calling themselves. Qatar is not our friend. I don't know why the Biden administration continues to pretend that it is. Of course, they do that with China as well. The amount of insane foreign policy boondoggles this administration gets us into and problems, pretending our enemies are our friends.